I think a decent amount of people will agree with me when I say that one of the hardest parts of the Yao method for big cubes is pairing the cross edges. People who switch to Redux from Yao will not know how to immediately utilize the free space that they have because they're too used to the restricted areas from the solve centers that they have from Redux. So as a result, most people will not know the most efficient solution to solve most of the cross edges in their solves. Today I'll be showing you an insight of how I do cross edges and how I think you should as well. I think one of the most main tips easily is by just looking at example solves on the world-class cubers and see how they would normally do their cross edges. I feel like that's the same thing for every other event if you want to get good at it. The basic concept of being able to master this stat is being able to solve or pair every single cross edge without a single pause or with as little pauses as possible. Since this is only the second step of the Yao method, there are still a lot of unsolved pieces, meaning it's slightly harder to track every single edge piece one by one as we're solving them around the cube. So as a general principle, when we're doing our second center, we'd want to solve the last bar as slow as possible. Along the way, we should be tracking pieces for our first cross edge. In this case, we would be able to see these two, and we would just track these two, and then we'll be able to find the rest later. So let's just pair that real quick. And then one's right there, and then the rest will just come along easily. And when it comes to actually figuring out the solutions on how to pair these cross edges, I think it's best we find out different solutions and see which one works the best for us. Obviously on 5x5, there's way little cases since there's only 3 pieces that we have to look for. The main one being pairing them one by one, just like that. Second being pairing the 2 outer wings and then finding the midge later. The last case we have is this sort of flipped case, and we can just find the last piece, utilize it to pair the last cross edge. Some food for thought is that our first cross edge should not be in the way when we're trying to look for our second cross edge. And what I mean by that is that, let's say we have this cross edge right here that we're going to pair. We could do this 2 ways. We could one, do that like that and move it so that it's on our left hand side, or something else we could do is move the outer wings to the midge instead and then put it to the bottom. Now in most cases, I would recommend solving it to the bottom instead, because then you'd have a space to look over here and you could possibly find some pieces over here for your next cross edge, as opposed to doing here. This is just in the way for no reason, and looking in here is slightly more difficult than just looking to your left right here. As for your second cross edge, if you're not solving the one opposite to the one you just solved, I recommend solving it to the one bottom of the cross edge you just solved and then move it over here instead, so that you can still see this side and this side for your last cross edge. What I mean is, let's say green is over here, so our next one would be orange. So we would be solving orange like this, and instead of doing that here, we should just do that instead, so we can still look around this area for our last cross edge. As for your last cross edge, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Once you solve 2, I think the rest should just come along way easily, because you're just having to find like the last remaining pieces that have white on the edges. As to where to actually look for the pieces, funnily enough, the place we should look first is the most obvious one, because for some reason, I think it's just a me problem, but I tend to ignore the piece when it's literally at the most obvious spot. For example, let's say I'm doing the blue edge here. I solve these 2, and I'm gonna find the last one here. And I can't really find the piece over here, but oh, look at that. It's over here this whole time. So you just waste like a good 2 seconds looking around the whole cube when it's literally just one move away from being solved the whole time. One more tip I guess I could add is that we should still be able to control our turning. So we shouldn't really spam for this part, because of course this step needs a lot of look ahead as opposed to, let's say, centers. So we do not really want to be turning at our top speed. Like if we do this, we can't really be looking around our cube very easily. So I suggest we turn very slowly, so that way we can see more pieces along the way. Obviously, we don't turn like very slow, we just do very controlled so that we can find some pieces. But for larger cubes, such as 6x6 and 7x7, the same principles don't apply as well. Obviously, most of them are a decent chunk the same, but there are some extra things to note down, because obviously there are more pieces than just on 5x5. Obviously, since there are more pieces, our look ahead would have to be even greater than on 5x5. And to make up for this, we shouldn't really have like a set pattern on which pieces to solve first. Like, okay, I'm gonna solve the inner 2 first like that, and then I'll solve the outer 2 later. I think a general better way to do it is just seeing whatever comes across first and then figuring out the rest later. 7x7 is even worse because, you know, this has the most pieces, so it's literally the worst. But I think one thing you should note down for is that you should really be careful in your turning here, because obviously since there are two inner slices here instead. We should really be careful on our turning here, because let's say we already have the middle piece solved right here and we want to put this one, we might accidentally do something like that instead, and then we insert it without knowing that we knocked out one of the pieces wrong. So we should really be careful with that. And we really want to utilize these types of cases. If we already have like two pieces solved together, generally we should prioritize that one first, because you're not going to get like cases like those a lot around the cube. Let's say like this, yeah, we have two pieces already solved right here. We should really prioritize when you get cases like those, because they don't pop up a lot. The flip case that I mentioned beforehand on 5x5, like this one, this doesn't apply to just solving the whole cross piece in one. It can also work in little segments. What I mean by that is this. We have this sort of case like here. We have two pieces that go in the same edge solved, but they're not really solved. One of them has to be flipped. So you can either find the other middle edge or the other outer wing in order to make this into three solved edges. In this case, it would be easier to use this. So we could just do something like that. And then the last one you can just find along the way. One more tip for 7x7 is to really make sure that you're doing the correct slice moves that are more finger trick friendly. What I mean by that is we have this sort of case right here. We could move this one by one, or something else we can do is just do that, which I think is way easier for me personally. I'm not sure if that makes much of a difference, but for me, it makes quite a big difference because I'm not that good at slice moves.